What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm here once again to give you the most comprehensive NBA player prop preview you're going to see. In these videos, I'll share my screen. I'll take you through outlier.bet. I'll share the props that I like. We'll go through key matchups. We'll talk about their form. We'll talk about the lineups, tell you what I like, and I'll tell you what I don't. And I do all this to not only help me make the best bets possible, but to give you all the information that you need to make some educated decisions when it comes to sports betting. Worked for us quite well yesterday, over 6 units profit in the bank. We've got a lot of games to get through. Hopefully we find some more winners. Let's go. So we're kicking things off with the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Charlotte Hornets in this one. Max Strus is a game time decision. Outside of that, everybody is good to go. Let's get things started with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Karis LeVert starting at shooting guard. No Donovan Mitchell once again. His points line, 14.5 points. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games. The matchup, somewhat difficult, and he only scored 7 points the last time he played the Hornets, covering 2 of his last 4. If you want to look at his assist prop, I honestly don't mind this. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10. He's got a good matchup. 7 assists against the Charlotte Hornets the last time they played. He's covered in his last 2. So 2 out of his last 4. Karis LeVert assists. I don't mind that. It's made its way to my short list, and I'll investigate that a little bit later. His rebound prop, 4.5, 7 out of his last 10. The matchup's not too bad, and he's covered in 1 out of his last 4 against the Charlotte Hornets. So definitely the assist side of things, I can see a lot of people potentially playing that. So that's on my short list. Jumping into Darius Garland now, his points prop 18.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. The matchup against the Hornets is not too bad. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 4, but he did only score 15 points in the last matchup against them. Having a look at his 3-point prop, it's 2.5, 4 of his last 10, 1 out of his last 4 against the Hornets, so that's not great. His assist number, 5 out of his last 10, 2 out of his last 4. He's covered in 2 consecutive games against the Charlotte Hornets. Looking at his rebound prop, that's at 2.5, 6 of his last 10, and 3 out of his last 4 against the Hornets. So Darius Garland assists, I honestly don't mind that. He's hit it in the last 2 against the Hornets, although 5 out of his last 10. It's a little bit shaky. He did have 10 assists against them most recently, but I guess his inconsistency is turning me off just a little bit. Jumping to Jarrett Allen here. His points line, 16.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Great matchup here against the Hornets. Did score 17 points, barely covering this line last time. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. Rebound-wise, another good matchup for him. 4 of his last 10, 2 out of his last 3 against the Hornets. Evan Mobley is back in the lineup, but Jarrett Allen still was able to cover this with Evan Mobley anyway. Speaking of Evan Mobley, his lines aren't available in this game just yet. Probably waiting on the Max Strus news, but we'll have to check that out before the game. Let's check these Charlotte Hornets. Let's check out Vasily Mijicic. So his points line is 11.5. 6 out of his last 10, but he only scored 2 points against the Cleveland Cavaliers last time. Looking at his assist number, 5.5's the line. 4 of his last 10. Only had 4 assists against the Cavs in his last game. And rebound-wise, lines at 2.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10, but only had 2 boards against the Cleveland Cavs. I'd personally be looking at probably an under in his points plus assists in this game. But he was hitting it nice and early before, but this Cleveland matchup is a very difficult one. He obviously struggled in that last game. Only 2 points, 4 assists in 30 minutes. He only shot the ball 4 times. So I'd be a little bit hesitant, I guess, because his shot attempts have been much higher than that in the past. So it might be a bit too early to take the under, but that's the way that I'm leaning at the moment. Let's have a look at Brandon Miller. Points 19.5. His matchup is a great one here against the Cavs. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. Scored 24 points against the Cavs in the last one. And that was his only matchup against the Cavs so far this year. He is at home. Now, as a rookie, he does play a lot better at home. I've been talking about that all season long. So I don't mind the over in his points prop here. What I do worry about in these back-to-back sets could be a potential adjustment. But keeping in mind, Cleveland won by 20-something points. So they may not make the adjustment required. He played 37 minutes, 8 for 18, got to the line 5 times, and he hit 3 3-pointers. Looking at his assist prop, that's at 2.5. 5 of his last 10, had 3 against Cleveland last time, but very low volume there. 4.9 potential assists, I'm not loving that. Rebound-wise, 6 out of his last 10, had 8 boards against the Cleveland Cavaliers from 11 rebound chances. I do like that as well. So I think for someone like Brandon Miller, I could be leaning on a points plus rebounds prop for him. Now I know he's only hit this in 4 of his last 10, but covered it convincingly in his last matchup against Cleveland. But at the same time, he's got a great matchup. Players like this make me a little bit nervous, though. But I'm going to add it to my short list purely because that form against the opponent and the matchup against the opponent is pretty good. I think it's worth a second look. All right, let's have a look at Miles Bridges. So he's got a tough matchup in this game. He did only score 13 points last time against the Cavs, 5 out of his last 10. Looking at his rebound numbers, 7.5 the line. 4 of his last 10 went under in that last game against Cleveland with only 6 boards. So I think one thing to call out, the Hornets, they're back at home. I think they had a 4-game road trip. So back at home in this one, if we have a look at Miles Bridges' home games, has had some pretty big rebounding efforts. If we look at his points at home, let's check this out real quick. Only 4 of his last 10, so that's not overly convincing, is it? Who else do we have? Nick Richards. Let's check Nick Richards out. His line's at 9.5. Scored 11 points against the Cavs in that last matchup, despite the Hornets getting pumped. 6 out of his last 10. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 5 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Versed them twice this year. Scored 11 points in both of those games. What are we looking at? Doesn't take too many shots, though, so you're really begging for a high percentage here and some free throws. I wouldn't be overconfident in betting Nick Richards. Rebound-wise, 9.5's the line. He only had 3 boards against the Cavs last time. The matchup's not a bad one, but if the Hornets are going to get blown out once again, might be difficult for Nick Richards here. The line is Cleveland for minus 10.5, so chances are there is a little bit of a blowout. So for this particular game, I've got Karis LeVert over in assists. I'll look at Brandon Miller's points and rebounds. I've also had a look. I'm going to have a look at Jarrett Allen in the first quarter. From what I remember from checking box scores, he's done okay. So I'll check the data to see if we see more of the same. Jumping into the Golden State Warriors versus the Orlando Magic. So we've got Gary Harris, Chris Houston, game time decisions in this game. So not major market movers. So let's get into it. Let's start with the Golden State Warriors. We'll look at Steph Curry first. Now his points line's only at 24.5. Tough matchup here against the Orlando Magic. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. Last 2 games against Orlando, 39 and 36 points, which is absolutely crazy. His 3-point line's at 4.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10, 8 and 4 in his last 2 games against the Orlando Magic. Assist-wise, his line's at 4.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Tough matchup, but he's also covered this in 2 consecutive games against Orlando. 4.5 at plus money for Steph Curry. You got to be crazy. So I think the odds for that too tempting to ignore. So let's have a look at Steph Curry assists after this. Rebound-wise, 3.5's the line. 6 out of his last 10, but he's gone under in straight games against the Orlando Magic. Klay Thompson, been quite destructive off the bench. Klay Thompson had a big game today, 28 points against the Miami Heat. Now he's covered this line of 17.5 in 7 out of his last 10 games. Similar to everybody else in this game, you'll find he's got a difficult matchup, but Klay covered in 1 of his last 2, scored 15 points against Orlando in their last matchup. His recent form is pretty good. He's getting 28 minutes. Still taking a lot of shots despite coming off the bench, so I don't mind it at all. Don't mind this for Klay Thompson. His 3-point market, 3.5's the line. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games, 1 of his last 2 against the Magic. Jonathan Kuminga had a pretty decent game today. His line's dropped. It was a little bit higher against the Miami Heat, but 16.5. He's covered in 7 of his last 10. Difficult matchup in this game. Did score 19 points the last time these teams matched up, though. So Jonathan Kuminga points could be something that I flirt with. Shot attempts, yeah, they're probably trending down, but given the line's a little bit lower, I feel like it's not the worst pick that you could make. I don't love the matchup, though, I've got to be honest. I know that he's hit it once against them, 7 for 14, got to the line. And look, he's playing similar minutes now, a similar number of field goal attempts. 50%, you could definitely do that. He's shooting 52% over his last 10 games. So, yeah, I feel this line is just about right. The odds, minus 104, though, it's not too bad. So I'll have a further look into Jonathan Kuminga. Let's see where we land. Hoping to find something a little bit more juicy, though. Rebound and assist props for Jonathan Kuminga. Not overly excited by them. So let's check out Andrew Wiggins. His points prop here is 10.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games, which is good. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. Only scored 10 points last time against the Magic. His rebound prop at 3.5. The odds aren't great, but he has hit this in 9 consecutive games, which is pretty wild. He did, however, go under in 3 consecutive games against the Orlando Magic, so I'm not liking what I see there. Draymond, let's check out Draymond. His points line of 6.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, one of his last 2 against the Magic. Assist-wise, 5.5, 6 out of his last 10. Has covered in both games against Orlando. And rebound-wise, 7.5. He's covered this in 6 consecutive games now, 7 of his last 10. However, he has gone under in his last 2 games against Orlando. Jumping into the Magic now, we'll have a look at Jalen Suggs. His line's at 12.5. Does have a good matchup here against the Golden State Warriors. He's hit in 6 out of his last 10, but only 1 out of his last 3 against the Warriors, going under in his last 2. His assist line's at 3.5 for plus money. He's covered in 3 of his last 10 and only 1 of his last 3 against the Warriors. And if we look at his rebound prop, that's 3.5 as well. 5 out of his last 10 gone under in 3 straight against the Warriors. So I'm not loving what I see for Jalen Suggs. Wendell Carter Jr., his points line's 10.5. He's got under in 4 straight. 5 out of his last 10 he's hit. 2 out of his last 3 against the Warriors. Rebound-wise, line's at 7.5. He has hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. Against the Warriors, 2 out of his last 3. Only had 2 rebounds in his last matchup against them, though, so that's a bit of a cause for concern. Paolo Banchero, his points line, 22.5. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10 games. Against the Warriors, he's covered in his last 2. 2 out of his last 3 games. Assist-wise, 6.5 is the line. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10. He does have a great matchup, but he's gone under in 3 straight against the Warriors. And rebound-wise, 7.5 is the line. 3 out of his last 10, 2 out of his last 3 against Golden State. Did have 12 boards in that last matchup. But Banchero, I don't bet on him too often because he is inconsistent as hell. He'll break your heart, hurt your feelings more times than he won't. Let's check out Franz Wagner. His line's at 18.5. 3 out of his last 10. He has covered in 3 consecutive games against the Warriors. Looking at his assists, the line's at 3.5. 4 of his last 10 gone under in 3 straight against the Warriors. And rebound-wise, 4.5. 4 out of his last 10. 1 out of his against the Warriors. So I'm not loving that either. So for this particular game, it looks like I'm going to be looking into Steph Curry, Jonathan Kuminga. Coming into the Brooklyn Nets versus the Washington Wizards. Cam Thomas is a game-time decision in this game. Washington do see Kyle Kuzma, Denny Avdija, Jordan Poole all playing. So Tyus Jones, probably the main starter that's still out for Washington, but they're fielding a slightly more competitive team than what we have been seeing. Brooklyn still 3.5-point favorites in this game. So let's, with these Washington Wizards, we'll start with Kyle Kuzma first. His points line in this one is 22.5. He does have a difficult matchup here against Dorian Finney-Smith. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 2 out of his last 7 against Brooklyn. Assist-wise, his line's at 4.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, 1 of his last 7 against Brooklyn. And rebound-wise, that line's at 7.5. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10, but he struggled against Brooklyn, hitting in 1 out of his last 7. So his last game against Brooklyn was pretty decent, but prior to that, if we check out his PRA, you can see that he has been struggling to hit this. Does have a good matchup to get some boards, but I couldn't take 7.5 with too much confidence, to be honest, for Kyle Kuzma. So looks like I won't be betting on him. Jordan Poole. Let's check out Jordan Poole. So his line in this game, 15.5. He's got a pretty good matchup. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10 games. Has got under in 3 straight against Brooklyn this season, though. Assist-wise, 5.5 is the line. 4 of his last 10, under in 3 straight against the Nets. And rebound-wise, 2.5. 6 out of his last 10, 1 out of his last 3 against Brooklyn. So not loving Jordan Poole's numbers. Denny Avdija. He's got a great matchup here against Brooklyn. He's hit this in 3 consecutive games now, 24, 17, and 22. He did score 21 points the last time he versed Brooklyn. He's covered this in 2 out of his last 7 against them. Honestly, I don't mind this. I don't mind this at all. I haven't bet on this bloke that much at all this season, but I do tend to look at him every single time he plays. Assist-wise, the line's at 3.5. He's hit this in 3 straight, 5 out of his last 10, 2 out of his last 7 against the Brooklyn Nets. Rebound-wise, 8.5 is the line. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10. Has an excellent matchup here. Had 13 boards last time against the Brooklyn Nets, covering in 2 out of his last 7. Yeah, I don't mind the rebound prop either for Denny. This guy's going to keep me busy tonight, I think. All right. Let's see what else we can find in this one. Let's jump over to the Brooklyn Nets. We'll have a look at Nick Claxton first. So he's going to have a great matchup here against the Wizards. Nick Claxton barely gets the ball, though. So he's covered his points line of 12.5 in 4 of his last 10 games, 3 of his last 7 against the Wizards. Rebounding, very capable of a big game here. I think I called it for the Toronto game. His line went up to 11.5. Despite him failing to get even close to it for a very long time, his line still went up. I went to the over. He absolutely smashed it, 16 boards against the Raptors. Now he's got a very easy matchup again against the Washington Wizards. So he's only hit this in 2 of his last 10, but he has hit this in 4 consecutive games against Washington. So the fact that this is plus money, it's got my interest. So I have a look at Nick Claxton to go over his boards again. I'm just wondering, can he put it together in back-to-back games? Only time will tell. Who else have we got? Dennis Schroeder. I was foolish enough to bet the unknown Dennis Schroeder last time, and then Cam Thomas got ruled out. So that blew up in my face. His matchup's not bad. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10. Assist-wise, the line's at 7.5. Great matchup here, but only 3 in his last 10. And rebound-wise, 3.5, 3 of his last 10. So I'm not too interested in betting on Schroeder. And lastly, let's have a look at Cam Thomas. If he does play, the line's at 24.5. Got a great matchup, but he's only hit in 4 of his last 10. And in head-to-head matchups, he's only hit this in 1 out of his last 6 against Washington. So for this particular game, I'll look into Denny Advia, Nick Claxton rebounds. They're the 2 that are screaming out to me. Jumping to the Portland Trailblazers versus the Atlanta Hawks. So very limited markets available at the moment, and that's because DeAndre Ayton, Matisse Thybulle, Jeremy Grant, DeJounte Murray, all game time decisions in this one. So I would not make any bets on this game until the lineups are confirmed. Ayton and Murray especially, they can really move some lines. Actually, similar to Jeremy Grant, if he plays, he'll move a lot of the lines for Portland too. So yeah, I wouldn't take any bets on this until I know what's happening. But let's have a look at DeAndre Ayton real quick. The matchup, somewhat difficult here against Atlanta. Line at 20.5, 7 of his last 10, scored 33 points in his last matchup against the Atlanta Hawks. So if DeAndre Ayton wasn't dealing with an injury, I'd lean to the over straight away. He's got left elbow tendonitis. I think the last time he was a game time decision, he didn't end up playing, but I said I'm not betting on him because he's a bit of a bitch. I can see him not putting in much effort or getting subbed out early purely because his elbow's sore. Rebound-wise, his line's at 12.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. Had 19 boards against the Atlanta Hawks. So, yeah, I don't mind the rebound prop in this one. He's got it done before, sore elbow or not. He shouldn't be too impacted by that. But I've got it as a soft lean, we'll call it. I got lines for Scoot Henderson. His line's 17.5. He's got a great matchup here against Atlanta. He's hit in 3 of his last 10. Did only score 2 points in his last matchup against Atlanta in 17 minutes. Assist-wise, line's at 5.5, 4 of his last 10. And his rebound line, 3.5, 5 out of his last 10 as well. Let's have a look at DeJounte Murray. Now, what's my man Murray got? DeJounte Murray got back soreness. Now, I don't know about you guys, but from what I understand, your back is a very important part of your body, especially if you're playing sports. So I don't know how sore his back is, but he's been carrying the load for Atlanta for quite some time. His points line, 26.5. The matchup's pretty good here against Portland. 5 out of his last 10. Fuck me. Look at this. 3 consecutive games. 40-plus points against the Portland Trailblazers. I actually remember this game against Portland. I did back him to go over because of the 40-point trend. But god damn, can he do it again for the 4th time? DeJounte Murray to absolutely kill Portland. He's got a bad back this time. I don't like betting on players who are game time decisions, but for this particular game, I'll look into both. I'll look into Ayton, I'll look into Murray because that's some interesting shit right there. Assist-wise for DeJounte Murray, lines at 9.5. He's hit this in 5 consecutive games. The matchup against Portland isn't too bad, but he's gone under in 3 straight. And I'm not overly surprised by that because he scored 40-plus points in all of those games. Rebound-wise, we're looking at 5.5. He's hitting 4 of his last 10, 1 out of his last 3 against the Portland Trailblazers. Who else is it? Chris Murray. We'll check out his points prop. I actually bet on Chris Murray with a bit of success not too long ago. I think it was against the Clippers. Now for Chris Murray, matchup's not too bad, but he's only hit this line in 2 out of his last 10. This is somebody I wouldn't bet on right now. He scored 9 points against Atlanta last time, but I wouldn't bet on him right now purely because if Jeremy Grant is good to play, Chris Murray is probably going to be the one who's most impacted minutes-wise. So I won't be touching that one. Pumping the brakes real quick. Very special announcements. Firstly, I want to announce our MVP for yesterday, and our MVP is not me. I want to give a special shout out to you. Dave Mace09 came through with a $25 super thanks. Now, I rarely get to see these. Honestly, melts my heart a little bit to imagine that you guys are willing to send me some cash to say thanks for all the work that I do. So I do appreciate it. Thank you, Dave. You're one of our MVPs. I appreciate you. The second announcement I want to make is that the watch party is going down Friday for me, Thursday night for you guys in the US. We're going to go through the Milwaukee Bucks and the Pelicans game. We'll watch it all together. What I need you to do, though, there's a link in the video description. It's for playback.tv. Now, it is free to join. I need you to click that link, sign up for free. If you've got League Pass, link it up, and we'll watch the game together. For those of you who don't have League Pass, I'll be able to give out 20 free passes for League Pass so we can all watch this game together. So let me know in the comment section if you're going to jump into the watch party. Now let's go. All right, we're jumping into the Los Angeles Clippers versus the Philadelphia 76ers, and Kelly Oubre is a game time decision in this one. The Clippers -6-point favorites, but they are in some terrible form at the moment. But let's jump into these players and see what we can find. We'll start with Kelly Oubre, just in case he does happen to play. Now, Kelly Oubre suffering from left shoulder soreness, which is not a great soreness to have when you're a left-handed player. So his points line, 16.5. Only scored 12 points against the Clippers in that last game. Didn't play in the fourth quarter. I remember that because I bet on Kelly Oubre's over 16.5 points. Even though the left shoulder might be troubling him, I'm not willing to take the bet, even though his form is great. 8 out of his last 10 when he is fully healthy. Definitely something that I would consider. Let's have a look at Tyrese Maxey now. His points line, 26.5, scored 29 points in his last matchup against the Kings. 6 out of his last 10. He has, however, gone under in 2 straight games against the Los Angeles Clippers. Assist-wise, 5.5's the line, 1 of his last 2 against the Clippers, and 3 out of his last 10 overall. His rebound prop, 3.5, 3 out of his last 10, under in both games. And then his three-point market, 2.5's the line. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10. He has gone over in his last 2 games against the Clippers, only taking 5 attempts per game, but nailing 3 of them in both of those games. Looking at his last 10, he's averaging 7.4 attempts per game, which is pretty good. You need to see that volume. But against the Clippers, it only seems to be taking 5 per game. So I'd be a little bit hesitant, but definitely leaning to the over on Tyrese Maxey 3-pointers. Let's have a look at Kyle Lowry. He's in the starting lineup these days. See if he's doing anything. Points-wise, not something I'm fucking around with. Looking at his assists, though, 4.5's on line. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, but wildly inconsistent. So I'm regretting clicking on him already. Tobias Harris, we all agreed we're not going to look at Tobias, but he's had a few good games, surprisingly. J. Cole looking motherfucker. Jumping into the Los Angeles Clippers. Who we got? Let's start with Norman Powell. Pretty sure he's had a few big games as of late. Maybe just one. No, there's been quite a few. So the line's at 13.5. In his last 10 games, averaging 17.2 points per game. The matchup is a somewhat difficult one against the 76ers. 7 of his last 10, though, and he's covered this in 3 consecutive games against Philly. Now, I do like this prop, mainly because I don't know what the fuck the Clippers are doing, but Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, they ain't doing shit. So counting on someone like Norman Powell to carry the load off the bench. Westbrook is back. That should also help Norman Powell get some more buckets. So I don't mind that for Norm. Who else we got? PG. His points line, 22.5. Had the lean on him to go over against Indiana, which happened. I didn't take the bet, though, because I'm a bit of a bitch sometimes. But he's hit this in 6 of his last 10. He's averaging 24.7 points per game in that span. He has gone under in 3 consecutive games against Philly, though. His assist prop, 2.5. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10, 2 of his last 3 against Philly. Jumping into his 3-point market. Now, Paul George, I believe, he set the record for the most 3-pointers made in a season for the Los Angeles Clippers. And we've still got a couple more games to go. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10, but only 1 of his last 3 against Philly. And his rebound props at 4.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10, under in 3 straight, but he's hit in 1 of 3 against Philly. So no, not loving PG in that one. Kawhi Leonard. He's line of 23.5. He's hit in 5 of his last 10, averaging 22 points per game in his last 10. 2 of his last 3 against Philly, so that's not great. Rebound-wise, 6.5. He's only hit in 2 of his last 10, under in 3 straight against Philly. And his assist prop at 2.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10, 2 of his last 3 against the 76ers. Probably lean to the under on his rebounds. He does have a good matchup, but he hasn't been rebounding very well as of late. But it's also plus money if you take the over. So the under, we're probably not going to see great odds for it. Let's have a quick look at Zubac, though. I think he's only up against Mo Bamba in this one, so surely it can't be too difficult. 9.5's the line, scored 13 points in his last game against Philly. 5 of his last 10. Has covered in 2 games against Philly. This is his last 2 of his last 3. And the matchup's pretty good, so I don't mind this for Zoo. What's he doing? 26 minutes, only attempting 6.5 shots per game. Last game against Philly, he did attempt 9, but with volume like that, it's not getting my underpants wet. Let's have a look at my man Russ. So back from a broken hand. First game in 24 days, scored 14 points against the Indiana Pacers. Line was 8.5. Tough matchup here against Philly. His assist line, 3.5. Did have 7 assists in his return against Indiana. So I do like that. But 4 out of his last 10. I only played 18 minutes in that game too. So very effective in a limited amount of time. And his rebound line's also at 3.5. He also covered that against the Pacers. Looking at his rebound chances, only had 4 rebound chances and got every single one. So I'm a big Westbrook fan, so I'm hoping he plays well. I'm just not going to put any bets on for him. James Harden. His line's at 14.5. Who would have ever thought James Harden's points line would get that low? He's covered in 4 of his last 10. Only scored 12 against the 76ers last time. His line for assists is at 8.5. He had 14 assists in that last game against Philly. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. Have a quick look at his potential assists. He's averaging 15.3 potential assists in his last 10. Had 22 potential assists against the 76ers in that last game. I feel like given the Clippers are completely healthy, they've got a full lineup in this one. Does it mean James Harden gets more assists, or does it mean he plays less minutes and gets less opportunities? That I'm not overly sure of, but what I am sure of, I'm not taking any on James Harden. Jumping into the next game, it's a New York Knicks versus Toronto Raptors. Alec Burks is a game time decision in this one. The Raptors they've got no one. Who's their best player? Gary Trent Jr., Kelly Olynyk perhaps. The Knicks 13-point favorites in this game. So let's jump into it, shall we? We'll start with the Knicks. We'll go with Jalen Brunson first. His point line's at 28.5, and I'm already leaning the under. I just feel like he doesn't need to destroy these Raptors. He does have a difficult matchup when it comes to scoring. So 3 out of his last 10. He did score 38 points in his last game against Toronto, though. That was towards the end of January. Prior to that, he's only covered in 1 of his last 7. Looking at his last 10 games, only covered 3 times. 30 minutes a night. Still taking 20 field goal attempts, though. So he's getting busy with it. So on volume alone, I'm probably a bit afraid to take the under, but I'm not suggesting to take the over either. Assist lines at 6.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. 5 out of his last 7 against the Raptors. He does have a good matchup here. The Raptors allow a lot of assists to point guards. Jalen Brunson, potential assists, get a little bit saucy, though. Sometimes they're high, sometimes they ain't. I don't love it, but I also don't hate it. So could potentially take an alternate line here for Jalen Brunson assists. Yeah, 3 games against the Raptors this year. He's covered it in all 3. I might have talked myself into it, but I'll look into that a bit more. I'm not loving it, got to tell you, but it's not the worst play on the board. All right, let's have a look at Dante DiVincenzo. So he hit a career high against the Detroit Pistons, absolutely blasted them, 40 points. Last 2 games have been excellent. Does have a good matchup here against the Raptors. Against the Raptors, he's failed to cover in all 3 games this season. Let's look at his 3-point line before I make any decisions. Does have a good matchup for threes. He's hit this in 2 of his last 10, though. The line's skyrocketed to 4.5. 11 3-pointers against the Pistons. Played 40 minutes. Took 20 attempts in that game. Jeez, I couldn't tell you. Do the Raptors let him blast them again? Or does he show up in bold print on the scouting report saying, don't let this man shoot? So I'd be a little bit hesitant to take him after such a wonderful performance. Josh Hart, still rebounding like a beast. Points-wise, he's got a good matchup. Line's at 13.5, though. He's gone under in 6 consecutive games. In head-to-head matchups, did go under the last time he played the Raptors, covering in 2 out of his last 3. We look at his rebound prop. Whoa! His line is at 13.5 rebounds. So he's covered 13.5 in 3 out of his last 10. I know the matchup is good. The Raptors probably won't score so many points. But surely if the Knicks blow these guys out, Josh Hart doesn't play another 40 minutes. Now, he's gone under this line in 3 consecutive games against the Raptors. In those games, though, only averaging 29.5 minutes per game. Over his last 10, 41.6 minutes a night, over 20 rebound chances per game. So, my goodness, I'm not fucking around with that. His assist prop at 5.5. He has covered this in 4 of his last 10 in head-to-head matchups. He's hit in 1 of his last 3. So, yeah, Josh Hart lines very high, somewhat intimidating. I want to check Miles McBride out, though. So he's got a good matchup as well. Lines at 15.5. He's covered in 2 out of his last 10. He's really seen an increase in his minutes in his last 4, though, which is pretty crazy. In those games, he's not attempting that many shots. He's attempting quite a few threes. Played poorly there against Detroit, 1 of 7. Could be a bounce back game here. He is on the road. Scored 29 in Golden State on the road, so I don't hate this. I just think this is just my gut feel that Dante DiVincenzo probably doesn't explode the way that he did in that last game. And someone like Miles McBride probably gets a good opportunity here to absolutely rinse these Raptors. They do allow a lot of 3-pointers, but let's check it out. Scored 3 points against the Raptors last time. Only played 12 minutes, though. So if you're going to play 40 minutes, extra opportunities, I honestly don't mind this. I might put a small player, Miles McBride, just got like 20 points or something, like as a value play, just to fuck around with that, because something tells me he could do something juicy in this one. Isaiah Hartenstein, his points prop, 9.5. He's got a big advantage here against Kelly Olynyk. He's hit in 3 of his last 10, 1 of his last 7 against them. His rebound prop, 10.5. He's only hit in 1 of his last 10. And against the Raptors, he's gone under in 7 straight. Just look at his minutes, though. Minutes, close to 25 minutes now, especially over his last 5. Rebound chances. Yeah, they're not very high, to be honest, for someone whose line's at 10.5. If you got Josh Hart expected to get about 13 boards, might be a bit difficult for Hartenstein. So I'm not loving the bet on that. So for this particular game, Jalen Brunson assists and Miles McBride points. They're the ones that got my attention at the moment. For this next game, we're checking out the Detroit Pistons versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, we don't have too many markets available. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, all game time decisions in this one. And all 4 of those players can move the market here. So let's briefly go over them all and see what happens. But similar to the other ones, I won't take any bets on this game until these lineups are confirmed. Cade, he's hit this points line in 5 out of his last 10 games. He's got a tough matchup here against the Timberwolves. Assist lines at 6.5. He has covered this quite well. 8 of his last 10. The matchup isn't too bad here. So that's something I'd be considering if he plays. His rebound line at 4.5. It's plus money. Has rebounded well 6 of his last 10, but the matchup is tough. Jalen Duren up against Gobert. He's got a tough matchup. Line at 12.5. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10. Had 16 points last time against the Timberwolves. Rebound-wise, 10.5. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10. Had 11 boards last time against the Wolves. So even though we hit last time, I'm not overconfident in it. And Edwards, 27.5. 5 of his last 10. Has a good matchup. Actually, his matchup isn't that great, believe it or not, against the Pistons. He's only hit this in 1 of his last 3. Assist-wise, lines at 5.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. 2 of his last 3 against Detroit. Rebound-wise, 5.5 as well. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10, 7 consecutive games now. And he's hit in 1 of his last 3 against the Pistons. A bet that I've been riding for a while now, which with some success, is Anthony Edwards rebounds plus assists. Now, he hit that last time he played the Detroit Pistons. He's hit this in his last 3, but check this out. He's hit it in 7 consecutive games. And if that line stays at 10.5, do some line shopping, see what you can do. I do love this bet. And the big reason which is driving this upwards is the absence of Karl Anthony Towns. So I might take this bet because if Edwards plays, I don't give a fuck who else plays. Anthony Edwards will get shit done. Having a look at Rudy Gobert. His points line 13.5 in this game. Matchup's pretty good. He's hit in 4 of his last 10, 2 of his last 3 against the Detroit Pistons, though. And his rebound line, 12.5. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10 games and 2 out of his last 3 against Detroit. So he's been getting busy against the Pistons. I don't mind that. Warriors and the Clippers he went under against. Clippers, that's a tough matchup. The Golden State Warriors play small. In a way, keep Rudy Gobert outside of the paint. So outside of that, Memphis only played 27 minutes in that game. So I don't mind Rudy's rebounds in this one. I got to be honest with you. His points I don't mind either, but I think his rebound prop, I do like it a bit more. How long's he been back from his injury? Played 2 games since his injury against Cleveland and Golden State. Played 37 minutes in both of them, so I'm not worried about a minutes restriction in this game. The blowout, probably a risk here. The Timberwolves, 14.5-point favorites. Chances are Rudy doesn't have to play 37 minutes. Scrolling the board to see what other blowouts have occurred. Now, Minnesota hasn't had too many blowouts, actually, which means Rudy does get to play a lot of minutes. But, yeah, I'll put that on my short list. I'll check out Rudy, but it all depends on whether he's going to play. Jumping into the Indiana Pacers versus Chicago Bulls. Aaron Naismith, Alex Caruso, and TJ McConnell are all game time decisions in this one. We'll start with the Indiana Pacers. Hate to say it, but I think I'm going to take Siakam rebounds. I already know how the teams match up and shit like that, but it did burn me last time. But let's have a look at Pascal. His points line of 22.5. He's hitting 4 of his last 5, 6 of his last 10. Did only score 17 points against Chicago last time in an overtime loss. So played 36 minutes, but he only attempted 12 shots. Looking at the matchup, he's got a great matchup here. His assist prop, 3.5 for plus money. 4 out of his last 10. Only had 3 assists against the Bulls last time. And his rebound props at 8.5. He had 9 rebounds against Chicago last time. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. He's got an excellent matchup in this one. The 8.5 rebound line does seem about right. Like the last game against the Bulls went to OT. So he did have some extra opportunities. You can see he played 36 minutes. Normally he plays about 31. So yeah, I'm not overconfident in taking that rebound line. If it was 7.5, shit, I'll eat that shit up. But yeah, 8.5, I'm not too confident in Pascal for that. Having a look at Tyrese Halliburton here. He's got a tough matchup to score some points against the Bulls. He did score 17 last time against them. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He's covered in 3 out of his last 6. Assist-wise, his line's at 10.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. He's gone under in 2 straight, but he's had great assist numbers against the Bulls in the past. Check that out. 5 out of his last 6 games, he's covered this. In those games, 22 potential assists. If we check out his last 5 games, he's only getting 14 potential assists. So potential assist numbers dwindling for Tyrese Halliburton. So just because he's got it done against him in the past, I would have feel confident taking him again. Miles Turner, his line at 15.5. Matchup against the Bulls, not too bad. He scored 27 points the last time they played. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. Woo-wee! 6 consecutive games against the Chicago Bulls. Miles Turner's got it busy. In those games, we're looking at 30 minutes a night, almost 14 shot attempts per game. Looking at his last 10 games, 27 minutes, 12 shot attempts per game. Had 15 shot attempts in his last one against the Chicago Bulls. So if he's going to take about 12 shots to get 15 points, a couple of free throws, 2 3-pointers made, I can see him covering this. I honestly can. This is a road game for the Pacers, though, but he has covered in his last 2 road games. So I don't mind that for Miles Turner. Obviously, I'll check it out a little bit further, but so far, so good. Rebound-wise, 6.5's the line, 6 out of his last 10, and 4 of his last 7 against the Bulls. So I'm not loving that. Jumping into the Bulls, we'll start with Nikola Vucevic. His points line of 16.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. He's gone under in 3 straight, though. Tough matchup here against Miles Turner. He's hit in 3 of his last 6. His rebound line, 10.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. He has hit it in his last 2 against the Indiana Pacers. I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Vucevic there. DeMar DeRozan points, 26.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10 in head-to-head matches. Scored 46 points the last time these teams played. Has only covered in 2 of his last 6. So despite the massive explosion against them, I should be a bit hesitant taking his prop. Looking at his assist number, 5 of his last 10, he's covered 4.5. And he's hit in 2 of his last 6 against the Pacers. Rebounds, 4.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10. 4 out of his last 6 against Indiana, though, he's covered this. So I don't hate the rebound prop, I've got to tell you. We know that Vucevic is probably going to have to get out of the paint to defend Miles Turner. Someone like DeMar DeRozan could potentially sneak and snag these rebounds, but I've bet on DeRozan rebound prop before, and I was a very angry man watching him play. So I'm not willing to take that and put myself through the pain. But we've got Kobe White here. 20.5 points is his line. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10. Matchup, not too bad. He has gone under in 6 out of his last 7 against the Pacers, though, so I don't like that. Assist-wise, 4.5, 5 out of his last 10. Has gone under in 7 consecutive games against the Pacers. Now, he's got a tough matchup here. The Pacers allow the second fewest assists to point guards on the season. So for this one, if we look at the under, plus money play. I know he's only hit in 5 of his last 10, but the matchup is very important here. I'm just checking to see which games has he gone over. Allow a shit ton of assists. Boston surprisingly don't allow a lot of assists. They allow a lot of points to point guards. The Warriors allow a lot. Utah allows the most. And the Kings, that's not a bad matchup either. So, yeah, I might even lean to the under here for Kobe White. Plus money, under in his assists. I'll check that shit out a bit later. Rebound-wise, 4.5's the line. 4 of his last 10. He's only covered in 1 out of his last 7 against the Indiana Pacers. So you might want to look at an under in his rebounds plus assists, perhaps. 9.5. He's hit the under 6 out of his last 10. And he's obviously gone under in 7 consecutive games against the Indiana Pacers. So I think I might just stick to the assist prop, to be honest. Ayo Dosunmu, his points line, 15.5. Good matchup here against Indiana. Got 20 points last time against Indiana. 4 of his last 10. He's only covered in 1 of his last 7 against the Pacers. Assist-wise, 4 of his last 10. 2 of his last 7 against the Pacers. And his rebound-wise, line's only at 2.5. So nobody fucking with that. So for this game, Miles Turner, points, and Kobe White assists are the main ones that I'm going to be looking into. Jumping to the next one, it's the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Memphis Grizzlies. And you're always going to see limited markets here. LeBron's a game time decision. I'm sure Anthony Davis is a game time decision as well. Back-to-back game after a massive win against the Milwaukee Bucks. Lakers, only 4-point favorites in this game against Memphis, who only has Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson. They got a lot of players who are game time decisions as well. But let's just check the key players out. We'll start with Desmond Bane. His line at 17.5. Since he's come back from injury, he's played 4 games. He's only covered it twice. Head-to-head matchups against the Lakers, 5 out of his last 11. Assist-wise, 4.5. He's only covered in 1 of 4 games since he's come back. And rebound-wise, he's hit this in 1 of 4 games since his return. So I'm not loving that. Jaren Jackson Jr. up against AD in this one. Now, he's covered this in 6 of his last 10. He's hit this in 3 of his last 11 against the Lakers. Jumping into LeBron James. His line is at 25.5. Matchup here isn't too bad against Memphis. He's hit in 6 of his last 10, but he's hit in 2 of his last 9 against the Grizz. Assist-wise, 8.5's the line. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10, but he's gone under in 9 consecutive games against Memphis. His rebound prop here is at 7.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, and he's covered in 7 of his last 9 against Memphis. Anthony Davis, his points prop 22.5, had a massive game. I think he played 52 minutes in the game today against Milwaukee. 51.9 minutes. It was crazy. We did bet on his over, so I was glad that cashed. But he's hit this line in 5 of his last 10. His line's only at 22.5. I can't see him playing big minutes on a back-to-back after playing 52. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 5 of his last 10 against Memphis. Rebound-wise, his line's at 14.5. He's covered this in 4 straight now. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 straight, 4 of his last 10. I'd lean to the under, knowing what he had to go through today. The Lakers should be able to beat the Grizzlies pretty easy. Christian Wood is out, so we should see Jackson Hayes potentially get a lot more minutes. But, yeah, I wouldn't feel confident taking anything on Anthony Davis. 3 more games to get through. My God, this is a big slate. We've got the Houston Rockets versus the OKC Thunder in this game. No changes to any lineups. OKC are on a back-to-back in this game, though. So let's check it out. Let's look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So his line's at 30.5. Matchup somewhat difficult here against Houston. This is the poorest he's played all season, SGA. Rumor has it that he is suffering from some sort of injury, but He's covered in 4 of his last 10, 3 straight now against Houston, 5 out of his last 7. His assist prop, 5.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, 4 of his last 7 against the Rockets. And his rebound line at 6.5. He's covered in 2 of 7 against the Rockets. Minutes against the New Orleans Pelicans today. On a back-to-back, my gut says to take the under in his PRA, 42.5. He's gone under in 5 straight now. He does have a difficult matchup for rebounds and assists, so I'm leaning to the under there. He's gone under in 5 out of his last 7 against the Houston Rockets. So he is playing poorly, though, so there could be a bounce-back spot here. This is a home game as well. So they're at a 3-game road trip. So back at home, SGA could probably get busy here. So not overly confident in taking his under, but that's just what my gut's telling me. Josh Giddey, we took his over today in his PRA. He covered that in points alone. 25 points against the Pelicans. He was huge. Now he's covered his line in 6 of his last 10. He's covered it in 4 of his last 7. His assist prop, 4.5, 6 of his last 10, and he's covered in 5 of his last 7 against Houston. And his rebound prop at 6.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10 games, 4 of his last 7 against Houston. So he does have a good matchup here to get some boards, but I don't know. I'm a little bit cautious in betting the same player on back-to-back nights. Jalen Williams, he had a pretty strong outing today as well. 18.5 points, just scored 26 against the Pels. Matchup is a good one here against Houston. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. Covered in his last 2 games against the Houston Rockets, both of these in February. So pretty strong performance from J-Dub. So yeah, I'd lean to the over in this one. I must tell you though, I do have a bad record when I finally do decide to bet on Jalen Williams. Doesn't seem to work out for me, but let's see how we go. Assist-wise, lines at 3.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. He also hit this in his last 2 against Houston. Rebounds, 3.5. He's hit this in 7 consecutive games against the Houston Rockets. Does have a great matchup, but he's only hit in 4 of his last 10. Looking at his rebound chances, they do go up and down. Great rebounding record against Houston, though, so that's pretty interesting. But I don't know. That looks like it's too good to be true. Matchup is good. There's a lot of green on this screen. Somewhat intimidating, to be honest. Let's have a look at Chet Holmgren. His points line, 15.5. Matchup, not too bad here against the Houston Rockets. Obviously missing Alperen Şengün. So he could take advantage of this one. Jabari Smith Jr. has some size, but not like Chet. But let's check this out. 15.5 points. He's hit in 5 of his last 10. He's covered in 2 straight against the Houston Rockets, though. His rebound line is at 8.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. Had 13 rebounds in his last matchup against the Houston Rockets, covering in 1 of his last 3. Let's jump into these Houston Rockets now. Fred VanVleet. His line is at 17.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10 games, 1 out of his last 3 against against OKC. Assist-wise, lines. See, check this out. His line's at 7.5. His lines are at worse odds compared to when he versed Portland, which is pretty crazy. He's got a tough matchup here. Lines at 7.5, and the odds have gotten worse somehow. So he's hit this in 1 of 3 games against OKC, under in 2 straight now. So I don't like that for Fred. Rebound-wise, 3.5's the line, 4 of his last 10, and under in 3 games against OKC. I think the main thing here is probably the points prop. If you're not liking what you see here, probably an under in his PRA. The numbers aren't supportive for any of his props, to be honest. 28.5. He has hit this in 6 of his last 10, though. Has gone under in 3 straight against OKC. But yeah, I'm not feeling it. Let's have a look at Jabari Smith Jr. 14.5 points is his line. Matchup's pretty good against Chet. 6 of his last 10. Scored 20 and 18 points in his last 2 games against OKC. Rebound-wise, 8.5. 4 of his last 10. Has covered in 4 consecutive games against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So he does have a great matchup here, to be honest, Jabari Smith. He's just been very inconsistent as of late. So I'd lean to the over. I honestly just don't like betting on the guy. Jalen Green, he's someone that I do like betting on, actually. He's got a great matchup here, but I'm pretty confident Lou Dort's going to be the one to pick him up. It wouldn't be Josh Giddey. He's hit this line of 26.5 in 5 out of his last 10 in head-to-head matchups against OKC. He's gone under in 5 consecutive games, so I don't like that. His assist prop at 2.5, 8 out of his last 10. He's also hit this in 4 out of his last 6 against OKC, averaging 7 potential assists in those 5 games. If you look at his last 5, he's only getting 6 potential assists. So even though this is looking good, I'd be a little bit hesitant. I'd probably lean to the over, to be honest, but that could be a pretty sweaty bet. For all we know, he could finish on 2. His potential assists seem to be trending in the right direction. I'd say, given his increased scoring rate as of late, teams are probably sending more his way, so opening up the opportunities to get some assists. So, yeah, I'll take a look into Jalen Green assists. Rebound wise, has been rebounding a little bit better, capable of some massive rebound efforts. The matchup, not the most difficult in the world. He has covered this in 3 consecutive games against OKC. So I might even consider a rebounds plus assist prop here for Jalen Green. 9.5. I'm not loving it, to be honest. I think I'll just stick with his assists. Who else we got? Dylan Brooks. He'll probably get bloody ejected from this game. Let's have a look at the Spurs versus the Jazz. Now, I've only got lines for Wemby and Lauri Markkanen, and that's because both of them game time decisions. Let's see what these two guys have to offer. Wemby's line at 23.5, 5 out of his last 10, got under in 2 games against the Utah Jazz. His assist prop of 4.5, 5 of his last 10, under in his last 2 against the Jazz. And his rebound prop of 10.5, 7 of his last 10, and he's gone under in 2 games against the Jazz. So, does that mean you just take the under in his PRA against Utah? It's cash both times against them, playing 24 and 27 minutes. In his last 10 games, he's playing 31 minutes a night, 5 of his last 10. What kind of injury has Wemby got anyway? Don't tell me it's his ankle again. Yep, left ankle sprain. So, in this game, Utah 2.5-point favorites. If I believed in conspiracy theories, I would say the Spurs are still tanking, and this is a winnable game for them, so they probably won't play Victor Wembanyama. But I don't believe in conspiracies anyway. Let's have a look at Lauri Markkanen. Had a pretty strong game in his return here against Dallas. Scored 34 points. He's covered this line in 3 of his last 10. Has covered in 5 consecutive games against the San Antonio Spurs. His rebound line, 7.5. He's hit in 4 of his last 10, 3 of his last 5 against the Spurs. So, not loving that game. No bets from me on that. A look at the Phoenix Suns versus the Denver Nuggets. If Suns were playing better, this would be a great game to watch, but we've got a little bit of fuckery to get through. Brad Beal, Yusuf Nurkic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic, all game time decisions in this fucking game. Can you believe it? So we'll go through the props. Don't take any bets until you know who's in and who's out. I would strongly encourage you to sign up for Outlier with the free trial because the player filtering is going to be very important, especially at this time of the season when a little bit of load management comes into it before the playoffs. You need to see how all of these players perform with and without certain players. So check out the link in the description. Outlier. I've got a free 7-day trial. You know what it is. Let's get into this. Start with Grayson Allen here. His line's at 11.5. Matchup is difficult here against Denver. He's hitting 7 of his last 10, and he scored 28 points the last time he played the Denver Nuggets, which is great to see. Who else have we got in this game? Bradley Beal. What's Bradley Beal suffering from? Right finger sprain. My goodness. So he's got a right finger sprain. Nurkic ankle sprain. Aaron Gordon's a foot strain. Nikola Jokic back inflammation. Jamal Murray left ankle sprain. Michael Porter Jr. has an illness. My God. All right, Bradley Beal. He's gone under this points line 4 consecutive games. He's got a finger sprain on his shooting hand. Last time he played Denver, he scored 16 points. 36 minutes, and he took 18 shots. Now, in his last 5, he's only averaging 9.8 shot attempts per game. So, knowing what we know, I would probably lean to the under here on Bradley Beal. And that is because the volume's not there. He's not shooting the ball much. We know that he's got a finger sprain on his right hand. There are also other scorers. I'm not going to take this bet because if Bradley Beal plays, KD, Devin Booker, Grayson Allen, they're not game time decisions in this one. So even if Bradley Beal does play, there are other people who can take those shots. Assist-wise, his line's at 5.5. He's covered this in 8 of his last games, 7 consecutive games now. He did have 6 assists last time against the Denver Nuggets. I've been betting on Bradley Beal assists for way too long. I think I'm gonna hop off the train. I think it's gotten hot enough here. 5.5 is just about right. It is a plus money play, but yeah, I'm not feeling it. His rebound line is at 3.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. Had 6 rebounds against the Denver Nuggets last time. So Nikola Jokic should have his Nurkic should have his handful with Jokic, depending on if they both play, right? This is what makes it so difficult. Let's have a look at D-Book. So his line's at 26.5. Tough matchup here. He's covered in 3 straight, 5 out of his last 10. He's covered in 6 of his last 9 games against Denver. His assist line at 5.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. 7 out of his last 9 games against the Denver Nuggets. His run prop, 4.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. 4 out of his last 9 against Denver. Last game, he only had 1 rebound in 35 minutes. So, yeah, this assist prop for D-Book's not too bad. Good hit rate against Denver. Not a bad hit rate in the games. His minutes are there. Potential assists, a bit how you going though. They're all over the place. 11 potential assists against Denver. 11 potential assists over his last 10 games. But minus 145, I don't feel too good about that. This dog must know that we're getting close to the end of the video. She's snoring like crazy. So KD, his points line, 25.5. The matchup's not too bad for him, but he's hit in 4 of his last 10. He has hit this in 8 of his last 10 games against the Denver Nuggets. 35 points in their last matchup on the 6th of March. So about 21 days ago. That was a game in the OT. He played 43 minutes. In his last 10, he's playing about 36 minutes a night. He's taken 18 shots per game. His shot percentage has been quite good over his last 2, but the volume hasn't really been there. Assist prop for Kevin Durant, 4 of his last 10. He's covered in 6 consecutive games against Denver. So I don't mind that. If we filter to his last 5 against Denver, what are we comparing here? His last 5 games, he's getting 6.8 potential assists. Against the Denver Nuggets, 8.8 potential assists. So potential assists were much higher against Denver than what has been as of late. Rebounds, 6.5's the line, 6 of his last 10, 7 of his last 10 against Denver. Yeah, the matchup's good here. Seeing 10 rebound chances in his last 10 and 11.5 rebound chances up against the Denver Nuggets. So, yeah, probably lean to the over, but not loving KD, got to tell you. All right, let's jump into the sick and injured Denver Nuggets. We'll start with Jamal Murray. 22.5 points, 6 out of his last 10. Good matchup here against Phoenix, who don't defend point guards very well. Has covered in 6 of his last 9 games against the Suns. Has played them, 3 times this season, covering 2 out of his last 3. So I don't mind the over here for Jamal Murray, but he is somewhat inconsistent, so I'm not too confident in that. Assist line at 6.5, 8 of his last 10, 4 of his last 9 against the Suns. And rebound-wise, 3.5, which is hit in 8 of his last 10. He's also hit this in 8 out of his last 9 against the Phoenix Suns. So big rebounding numbers from Jamal. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe he's PRA because all of his lines seem okay. 33.5. He's hit that in 5 of his last 10. So, yeah. I'm not getting the vibe. I don't want to get too excited about any of these picks because we don't know who's going to be playing. The minute you take some player out, the lines get all fucked up. Let's check out MPJ. His line's at 17.5 points. He's covered in 6 of his last 10 games. The matchup's a difficult one. Did score 19 and 20 in his last 2 games against Phoenix. His rebound line's at 6.5. He's hit in 6 of his last 10. 6 of his last 10 against the Phoenix Suns as well. Let's check out the Joker. 27.5 points is his line. The matchup against Nurkic, supposed to be difficult, but he's hit this in 6 of his last 10. And against Phoenix, he's hit this in 6 of his last 10. He has, however, gone under in his last 2 games against the Phoenix Suns. Assists, 7.5's the line. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. He has covered this in 7 of his last 10 against Phoenix. And his rebound line's at 12.5. We're looking at 5 of his last 10, 7 of his last 10 against the Phoenix Suns. So, not loving Nikola Jokic. Let's have a look at Aaron Gordon. Get the fuck out of here. 14.5 points, 4 of his last 10 He's gone under in 5 consecutive games against the Phoenix Suns. Scored 22 points against Portland. Denver were depleted in that game, so they were feeding him like crazy. So, yeah, I'd lean to the under here for Aaron Gordon. Assist-wise, 3.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. 2 of his last 10 against the Suns. And then looking at his board, 6.5. 5 out of his last 10 games. Under in 4 straight against Phoenix, covering in 3 out of his last 10. So for this particular game, look, a lot of lines are available. I don't feel good about any of them. I need to know who's playing. Then I'm going to fuck around with Outlier, play with the filters, and then hopefully find something juicy from there. So that was a lot of games to go through. And I got to tell you, yesterday's slate, there was only 4 games, and I came up with more leans than I did compared to this 12-game slate. So I'll probably see less bets, to be honest. But I'm about to dive into the lab after I edit and get this video out to you guys, see what I come up with. Check the pinned comment if you do choose to ride with me. Also, be sure to check the video description. Sign up to Playback. It's completely free. That's where the watch party is going to be. We're watching the Pelicans versus the Bucks. Thursday night in the US. Friday morning for those of you in Australia. I appreciate you if you made it this far. Best of luck. Let's go.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.